Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this Art in the Libraries virtual program. I'm Sally Brown, Exhibits Coordinator for WVU Libraries and Lead Coordinator of Indigenous Appalachia exhibition that's up in the WVU Downtown Library now and online. And we're so honored to have these artists here today that are part of this exhibition. And we want to thank you from the libraries and from the WVU Native American Studies program and WVU Humanities Center. And I also want to acknowledge that WVU, with its statewide institutional presence, resides on land that includes ancestral territories of the Shawnee, Lenape, Haudenosaunee, Cherokee, and many other Indigenous peoples. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, will be documented on our library's website for public viewing. And we welcome questions, and especially we encourage people to reflect on your experience hearing and viewing the various artwork here, and to comment and discuss in the chat, mention what stood out for you. So I am honored to welcome these 5 incredible artists: Nadema Agard, Connor Alexander, Erin Antonak, April Branham, and Ethan Brown, all of whom, like I said, are featured in Indigenous Appalachia. So first, I will turn this over to Nadema. Nadema Agard, Winyan Luta, Holy Woman Holy Red, is a Cherokee, Lakota, Powhatan artist, illustrator, curator, educator, lecturer, storyteller, writer, poet, published author, museum professional, and consultant in repatriation and multicultural and Native Americans arts and cultures. She earned a BS degree from NYU, an MA in art and education from Teachers College, Columbia University. Her work spans more than 4 decades and includes multiple solo exhibitions, group exhibitions, and guest curatorships nationally and internationally. Welcome, Nadema.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, afternoon, actually. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go straight to my PowerPoint right now. Okay, and I just wanted to say that I'm going to show you a lot of work that has a certain symbol, and I just thought that I would just go through some preliminary information for you to understand my work, why I make my work. My artwork has an individualistic style that draws upon cosmic subject matter. It has a global agenda it has a global agenda from an Indigenous perspective and reflects the interconnection of myself as woman, mother, Indigenous world citizen, Native North American, spiritual being, and warrior. My work has been influenced by the ceremonies of the Onondaga Longhouse, the Hopi Kiva on Second Mesa, the full moon and sweat lodge ceremonies of the Ojibwe, the sun dance of the Lakota, a pilgrimage to Medicine Wheel, Wyoming, Naniwea Mound of the Choctaw, the Mayan pyramids in Chichen Itza, and Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, home of the goddess Pele. So that you know that those are the things that influence my work. I'm trying to remove these things that I can't see that I'm trying to read. And many of my works are about birth and that place where we come from the spirit world into the physical plane as a sacred door. I make art using the mandorla or yoni or piscis vesica as cosmic symbol, not as a physical organ. So if you've ever been into Catholic churches, you will see a lot of the holy personages in the side of a vesica piscis or a mandorla or what I call a yoni, which is a birth, symbol of birth, which is a cosmic symbol, not an organ. So here's one of my first breakout pieces, Corn Mother, and it was for a show called The Box Art. And it turned out that after I did that show, I started making a lot more boxes. And this is called The Corn Mother. And then this one, as you can see, is can be a cross as well as a box. And I think it speaks for itself that, we're all from one Mother Earth. And then each of the four directions represent the four colors of humanity. And again, this one represents my involvement with the full moon ceremonies when I lived in Minnesota amongst the Ojibwe. And again, I'm representing the four sacred colors in the colors of corn that was given to the Hopi, and we're told to plant it separately. This one references the Virgin of Guadalupe, which I refer to as Tonantzin, Aztec mother of all the gods, and not the Christian icon, but the indigenous goddess. And this one is making a parallel between the Mesoamerican culture and Southeastern culture, because we're related. And then this is part of two called, this is the female piece, Blue Night Turtle Moon Birth Amulet of the West. And it's a reference to the Lakota birth amulets that we put our children's umbilical cords in. And this one is the turtle, which is the female. And then we have the male, and that's the lizard. And the female is the lizard is the protector, and the turtle is the fertility symbol. Here it is in a gallery show recently. And then this one is called Heaven's Door, and it's in reference to the Ocean Mother, also known in Europe as the Virgin Mary, but it's actually a title. And so this one is called Heaven's Door. It was influenced by the song by Bob Dylan, Knocking on Heaven's Door. This one's called The Healing of the Mother, and it uses some of our sacred plants like sage and sweetgrass and tobacco. And so this one is reference to my time in Minnesota. And this one is called Prairie Parfleche. It's kind of a play with abstract and representational and together based on the parfleche designs that the women did in the Northern Plains. And now men and women do it, but it was traditionally a woman's art, which is abstract. And then this one is also from that series, playing with the abstract and representational. And this is Buffalo Skull Rose, which is part of a series of 4 buffalo skulls around the moon. And each skull has a flower that represents, each one has a flower that represents the 4 sacred colors again are represented in the flowers. So we have the rose, the lotus, which is the south, which is the Asian, and the rose that we just saw was the east. And then we go to the center, which is the grandmother moon. And then we go to the west, which is the iris. And then we go to the north, which is the calloli. And they represent the 4 colors of humanity. And this is a drawing called Our Lady of Aguada Lakota, because it was a fusion of both the icon, the Mexican icon, and the Lakota symbolism. And this is Star Blanket Heaven, which is based on the star blankets of the Lakota people, and also was inspired by morning at dawn, seeing buffalo in single file across the snow bluff. And it kind of blew me away, and I wanted to memorialize that time. So this one is for that. And then this is a portrait of Frida Kahlo, an interesting person who of Indigenous and European ancestry, but it references a lot of the fact that she was in touch with her indigenous side, the corn, the parrot, the deer, all associated and sacred animals for indigenous people. And then this one is called as the Virgin Mother and represents the four aspects of the Earth Mother, because it really is the Earth Mother, and the different species of animal, the jaguar, the rattlesnake, the butterfly, and the hummingbird. This is a pastel that represents the white buffalo, which is an important person in our Lakota spirituality. And then this is a series called Parfleche Jingle Series, and they're based on the traditional Parfleche abstract paintings on rawhide that our women do, but this is the contemporary version. And it's, for me, important to pass on those traditions, whether we're in New York City or in South Dakota. And here's a close-up of Parfleche vision of heaven and earth giving birth to the stars. And it represents a symbol of mutual respect and reciprocity, heaven and earth, etc. And then here's a butterfly, as we know, is a symbol of transformation. And so that's one. And then this one is time and space, and time is represented by the cross, the four directions. Space is represented by the cross, the four directions, and the diamond represents the diamond of eternity that we make when we do God's eyes or medicine man eyes. And then this one is Parfleche vision of eternal birthing, which is reference to the core of the Mother Earth, the copper, all the minerals. And this one's called Great Lake Yoni because everything is male and female. And in this case, the canoe is the female, and then the paddle is the male. And this is something I did when I lived in Minnesota, a reflection of living in that part of the country, northern Minnesota, the Great Lakes. And then this one is called Forest First Goddess, and it's based on the story of the sister of the goddess Pele of Hawaii. And when I did it, I didn't know why I was putting that serpentine image in it. But some Hawaiian women came and they said, "Oh, we have eels in Hawaii. It's an eel." And I go, "Oh, that's really cool," because I didn't know why I was doing it, but that was the sister of Pele, the goddess of the volcano. And then this is called Moonbreast Mothers, and it's an installation of moon symbols and for three different goddesses. There's the goddess Diana of the ancient Romans and Greeks. There's the goddess of Mexico, the moon goddess Coyote, and then there's the goddess of Coyote and Hina. And Hina's the Hawaiian goddess. And it represents 9 as the number of the goddess. And the breast, of course, is a female symbol. A lot of people don't know that the goblet was formed from the breast of the goddess. So here you have the different phases of the moon and close-ups and details. And here's sort of an Andy Warhol kind of tribute, self-portrait in 4 of the 4 sacred colors. This piece is going to be at the Museum of the City of New York in the spring for a major show of New York City icons, because it's also a reference to the Statue of Liberty. And this one is called New York City Algonquin at the Core, and referencing the Lenape people and the indigenous people that are at the core of the history of Manhattan, or what we call Mannahatta. And so it references the corn, beans, and squash on the back of the turtle with the wampum belts. And this is Ma at the opening back in 2005. And here's a close-up of it with some offerings of tobacco. And then this one's the kind of play on the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And I said Lupe, meaning Guadalupe, the goddess in the sky with diamonds. And this one, Wampa Moons of Change, is basically I was invited to be in a show that featured artists who were going to talk about the intersection of Henry Hudson's arrival and the Lenape people. So I did this piece representing Lenape and Dutch communities. And as you can see, it's self-explanatory. All the different symbols are either Lenape or Native American or Dutch or European. And it was really interesting. I didn't know when I was going to do the piece that Henry Hudson's boat was called the Half Moon. I was doing the moon and it just worked out perfectly. And then the titles of the Lenape pieces are in the Lenape language. This is a traditional global mother breast series, again referencing the goddess of the four sacred colors. And then the birth opening in this piece has a mirror, which when you go to look at it, you can see your reflection in all of them, which means that they're all our mothers. And this is the scale of the pieces. And this is sort of an American statement, red, white, and blue series using the same icon. And this is called the Parfa Seed of Cosmic Life, which is just based on the abstract parfleche painting, but with the seed. And this one is called the Morning Star, which is based on Lakota tradition, on Peo Wichapi, and the four directions, the four stars are really the beginning of a star blanket. And they represent the four sacred colors. And here you see it as a cube. And here's this little nesting boxes. They're like influenced or inspired by the Russian nesting boxes, but these are Lakota nesting boxes that are parfleche nesting boxes. And they represent Earth, Mother, Father, Sky, and the four colors of humanity, red, yellow, blue or black, and white, in the order of the medicine wheel. And here they are up close. This one is the medicine wheel as a 6-foot installation representing the four sacred colors of humanity, the animal world, etc. And then these are the four Lakota virtues inspired by Buddhist tankas and Christian icons. But in our Lakota tradition, we don't have faces. So they represent wisdom, fortitude, generosity, and bravery. And the language, it's in the Lakota language. I think that's it.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's made the comments in the chat. Thanks, Nadema. And now I'd like to introduce Connor, a writer, game designer, and owner of Coyote and Crow LLC. Connor Alexander is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and lives in Seattle, Washington. His company and his personal designs reflect his desire to amplify Indigenous voices and projects, especially in the game industry. One of the company's primary goals is to connect non-natives to those projects in a way that fosters communication and understanding while avoiding appropriative pitfalls common in popular media. His flagship game, Coyote and Crow, is a science fantasy tabletop role-playing game that broke Kickstarter records and has received numerous accolades, including a Nebula Award nomination for game writing. The game is set in an alternate future where colonization of the Americas never happened. Welcome, Connor.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this is a real treat to be able to speak to you all. Thank you. When I started Coyote and Crow, one of my core ideas behind creating the game in the first place, back when this was just an idea for a singular game rather than an entire company centered around that game, was that I was tired of not only seeing little representation in tabletop gaming and other popular media when it comes to Native Americans and Indigenous people, was that it wasn't just a small amount, it was poorly done when it was shown. And I started to realize that as somebody who was working in the industry, I had an obligation to counteract that. I wasn't in a creative role when I started working on Coyote and Crow. I was working for a distribution company, and but that allowed me to see sort of the back end of the industry and some of the failings, especially when I would see publishers who I admired and people who were putting out games that I thought were good games, and they would come along with a game that had very clearly Indigenous themes and concepts strapped onto those games. And I knew that they had either done no work as far as the understanding of why they were strapping those themes on, but they hadn't brought anybody on board who knew what they were talking about. And I realized that rather than just nitpicking them from behind the scenes, that it was an obligation of mine to step forward and present a better alternative. And Coyote and Crow was born out of that. So the idea for the concept of a game where the setting is an alternate future where there is no colonization never happened, was that I was also tired of seeing in media, even when it was done accurately, so often we're put in situations where the subject matter is our collective trauma, whether it's murdered and missing Indigenous women, or whether it's the fallout of colonialism, or whether the financial struggles of people on reservations. Like, I wanted a break from those things for everybody. So for me, as a person who grew up on science fiction and fantasy, I felt like how can I give people a world, a sandbox that they can play in, and give them an opportunity to play in a world where they don't have to deal with those for a little while, where they can step back. And so the end product of that is the Coyote and Crow role-playing game. If you're not familiar with role-playing games, they're similar to things like Dungeons and Dragons. They're collaborative storytelling games, and there's no winners or losers. You're sitting down there to collectively tell a story. And I think we've laid out a pretty good universe, a pretty good world in Coyote and Crow. It's a collaboration between myself and 6 other writers, all Indigenous, and then almost 30 artists, most of whom are Indigenous. And we've expanded. We're moving on beyond just this role-playing game and trying to branch into more classic tabletop game spaces. And let me show you some imagery here. Hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, so it's this is our core game here on the right, the Coyote and Crow core rulebook. We have a set of dice that go along with it. But we're also branching out into tabletop games like Nasi, which is a very classic push your luck dice style game where we tried to incorporate some Indigenous concepts into this with some amazing art from Indigenous artist Wolf Tomoyakeru. We our continued mission is to expand into the tabletop space and show both native audiences and non-native audiences that there are modern alternatives to gaming that can be shared experiences, that can be wonderful experiences, and include Indigenous concepts and themes from all over North America, hopefully, and eventually Central America and South America too. We're working on expansions with Indigenous folks from those regions as well. But I think that too often we see folks being sort of channeled into gaming that either doesn't include them physically, representationally, as far as their looks, or conceptually. You look at games like Monopoly. I don't think there's a single Indigenous concept in Monopoly. I don't think you could find one if you tried. Our hope is that this makes gaming a little more approachable for Native audiences, and is also a bridge for non-Natives to come in and see a healthy representation of Indigenous creativity. I think that's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I've got questions.
Yeah, be sure to see the chat. Lots of people love this. This is really exciting. Thank you. And now I welcome Erin. Erin Lee Antonak is a sculptor, a milliner, and a Wolf Clan member of the Oneida Indian Nation of New York, currently based in New Orleans, Louisiana. She holds a BFA from Bard College, an MFA from SUNY New Paltz, and has studied at Lacoste School of the Arts, France, and Vermont Studio Center. She has held curatorial positions at the Contemporary Arts Center, New Orleans, and the Orr O'Keeffe Museum of Art, Biloxi, Mississippi. She has served as the board chair of the Indigenous Women's Voices Summit in Hurleyville, New York, and currently serves as a Yale University Morse College Fellow in New Haven, Connecticut. Erin has worked in various museums and art galleries developing, designing, and building exhibitions for over 25 years. She has organized and curated shows in Europe, Asia, and North America. Her artwork fuses traditional Iroquois sensibilities and craft techniques with contemporary materials and concepts. Welcome, Erin.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I think I'll do what Nadema did and just kind of jump into my slides so we can get through those quickly. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that okay? Okay. So I kind of always like to start my talks with the people I learned the most from about my culture. And this is my grandfather, Chief Chikoy, Richard Chikoy Christian. He was the last traditional chief of the Oneida Indian Nation. He was a renowned wood carver and silversmith. He's wearing, he's holding a condolence cane in his hand, which is the roll call of the chiefs that he carved. And he's wearing a bolo tie that he made. And so he was a very big influence in my life in terms of teaching me about traditional craft. Alongside my mother, let me see if I can get this to advance. This is my mother, Rita Jawante Christian Benson. My mother was an anthropologist and also a craftswoman. So between my grandfather and my mother, along with my other relatives, I was really trained in traditional Iroquois, Oneida specific craft. My family worked at museums making replicas for anthropological institutions, and we were really well known for the authenticity. So when I learned how to make baskets when I was young, I also had to make the splints and like pound a tree all day. And when we made corn soup, we had to make it with lye and really go through the process of it. So I always like to kind of start here. I've pretty much been an artist my entire life, making crafts and traditional Iroquois, Oneida objects. But it wasn't really until I went to college in the mid-90s at Bard when I was exposed to contemporary art outside of the Indigenous context, because I grew up going to museums, but they were always at natural history museums because that's where Native art was shown, even if it was contemporary. So I'd never really seen a lot of contemporary art. And I got very excited about it. So let's see. So this is a picture of and back in this picture, my mother in here is making a corn husk doll with my younger brother. So this is her teaching him to make a corn husk doll. And this is also her teaching, a bunch of elm trees were being knocked down. And so my mother was teaching them how to remove bark from an elm tree so that would be watertight, which can only be done one time a year when the leaves are the size of a squirrel's ear, in case you ever need some elm bark. So like I said, I was trained in kind of these traditional ways of doing things. This is a picture of my son, my oldest son, making his first corn husk mask. his first cornhusk doll, sorry. And so the biggest evolution of my work that led me to kind of the place I am now was the death of my mother 10 days after the birth of my son. So up until that point, I had always been the receiver of cultural knowledge, and I kind of never saw myself as, I was a receiver. I was a receiver, I was the end of a line, I was a seventh generation. And you can look up the Iroquois concepts of seventh generations if you'd like. But at that moment of, a birth and a death and a birth, I suddenly saw myself as an elder. Suddenly I am now a link in a chain, and it was very soothing for me, and it was very comforting to realize that I'm not alone. I'm not the end of anything. I am my lineage stretches way back in far into the future, and I saw that I was now had these obligations about how do I maintain tradition. How do I pass on traditional craft, traditional knowledge, which I think comes in the form of craft, to my children and to my grandchildren and my grandchildren, future. And also, how do I insert my own voice into the evolution of a living and breathing culture? So these are like the two things I'm looking at. So this is me learning how to braid corn husks, sew corn husk. Corn husk is a very big part of my family's lineage. The women in my family are corn husk braiders. And so I was designed to braid corn husks, and I work a lot in it. So these are some of the traditional crafts. And when you look at a lot of my contemporary work, I do really use a lot of this language, this visual language and these techniques when I'm working. So this piece I put in because this really is the epitome of like what I'm doing. This is a traditional corn husk doll made with red corn husk and white corn husk, in the way my mother taught me how to do it, and the way her mother taught her how to do it, and so on. And then the doll on the right that it's holding hands with is actually made from a plastic called PLA, which we use in 3D printing. And the plastic used for 3D printing is made from cornstarch primarily. And so I am reclaiming the plastics. We are using contemporary plastics as an indigenous invention. And so what I'm doing here is taking this traditional means of making a doll and using corn in a new way to make this tradition, to tell the same story of the no-face doll, but in a new way. So this is kind of me talking about this, my personal transition from being a receiver and now a teacher. My work is really influenced by science fiction. The movie Barbarella was a huge influence to me, huge influence. I worked a lot I was a trained milliner in San Francisco and worked on Wigstock West with Lady Bunny and RuPaul in the mid-90s. And I also, was a powwow kid in the 80s and 90s. So I have a lot of that kind of aesthetic in my work and kind of playfulness. And so it's like drag culture meets Barbarella meets 80s and 90s powwow fancy dancer. And so these forms start evolving. I start thinking of craft as like a way to access my past and my ancestors. And so when I work in these traditional ways, the braiding, it's very soothing. I can kind of reach a flow state with it. And for me, I start thinking about like, what is working in this craft doing to my body? Like, is it activating like this inherited resilience, this inherited like knowledge that my DNA knows? My hands were made to work with corn husk. My hands were made to braid. What am I like, how am I able to access this stuff? And I believe it's through like the making of things. So like I said, we got science fiction, time travel, and ceremony. So yeah, I'll just keep going on these slides because it starts to get down a little weird. So what I'm working on now is creating these portals and wormholes. This is when Barbarella and all my science fiction interest comes in, is that I'm starting to use craft to tell stories and to actually try to access my past self, my future self, my grandmothers, my great-grandmothers, my great-grandchildren. And it's become this kind of playful space of making objects and all these things that belong in this ceremony that I'm creating. And the ceremony I'm creating is I call reverse time capsule. I'm going to have 24 Indigenous time traveling women, which I think is myself in the future. So I think I'm making this for myself in the future to go back to myself when I'm young. Stick with me. And so I'm creating this world where we're going to have this ceremony and walk along the street in New Orleans that I was living on when my mother had a stroke at the age 50, when she was 50 years old, and Katrina hit. So I lost my whole community here and my home community when I was 26 and went through a lot of trauma as a result. And falling back into craft really saved me. And so what I wanted to is do this ceremony using this craft along that same street I was on all the time when I was going through a lot of trauma as a young person, and put messages into the ground for myself when I'm 26 to let myself know that I'm going to survive this next decade and a half that is going to be full of trauma. And I think that this is the way I've chosen to go about it. But these are some of these corn husk plastic pieces. These are industrial tufted horsetail, corn husk, and wool. These symbols started turning into wormholes. So I start taking kind of this visual imagery, and I repeat and I repeat and I repeat while I'm in a meditative state to kind of access this. Some details of some of these pieces. This is like a 12-foot painting, which for me is like a creation story. We talk about like, yonis earlier, about kind of birth and death and transition. These are some of the women who are starting to come out of these wormholes. And this is like as the process is evolving. Like I said, I'm in the middle of this. It's probably, I'm hoping for like 3 years to be able to complete these full outfits. And this is like, I do some installations of these screaming women, crying women, singing women that are coming out of these portals and these wormholes. And this was an installation in a Frank Gehry building. So it's like these very warped spaces. And these two corn husk pieces were recently acquired by the New York State Museum, which I'm very excited about because they'll be hanging alongside my grandfather's work, traditional work. And like, that is the core of what I'm talking about, is like, I'm a contemporary Indigenous woman, but I'm so lucky to have access to all of this history and all of this, knowledge of my relatives. So that's actually very special to me, to know that this work is going there. And it actually includes some of the last braiding I did for my mother right before she passed. So I feel really good about that. And these are just some other shots from the installations. And these are some drawings of my women that I'm currently working on. These are some in process. They're going to be fully regalia. There's going to be a band, a marching band, because I'm in New Orleans, so we need a marching band, dancers and scent, and a really big ruckus party ceremony. So these are some of my ladies. They're made with leather, they're made with plastic, they're made with horsetail, just kind of is very whimsical, paper straws. And this is me with these are some of the earlier ones I did that kind of started this process. So that's kind of the work that I do and I'm interested in, and yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And be sure to look at the chat. Everybody is loving your work and everyone's work. Again, this is such an honor. You all are great. So thank you, Erin. And I'd like to introduce April. April Branham is an Indigenous artist and member of the Monacan Indian Nation based in Amherst County, Virginia. She considers art a vital role in the community that helps to preserve our heritage and cultural traditions. April is inspired by the mountains where her family resides and the many colors of dancers' regalia at powwows. She believes that art gives a voice to those that no longer have one. Her pride and connection to her heritage show in every painting, and she hopes to create pieces that inspire others and bring awareness to various causes for many years to come. Welcome, April, and let me see if I can share screen here.
Yes, Sally's going to be trying to show some of my slides that I had prepared for today.
Can you all see it?
I can see it. I'm not
Okay.
sure if everybody else can.
Okay. If you can, then they probably can. So just let me know when you'd like me to scroll down.
Okay.
Okay.
This is one of my very first pieces that I had done to represent the murdered and missing Indigenous women movement. You know, it really is a cause that hits deep in my heart, considering there are so many of us that keep going missing, and not quite enough is being done about it. The cases are not being reported, so that, you know, if they're not reported, you can't investigate. They basically, unfortunately, go through and close a bunch of these cases and write off some of the missing and murdered as runaways, or you know, some of them may have problems with alcoholism before this, and because of that, they do not search for them. And so this painting represents, if you can see the red handprint in the middle, is the main symbol that they use to signify this movement that is going on. The fingerprints at the top of the screen, you can't really see it too well, but there are a bunch of hands that are reaching for the person that has gone missing. The red hand symbolizes one of our many murdered, missing Indigenous women, two spirits. There's a lot of them, and this represents us being pulled away from our culture, from our family, from our heritage. When one of us goes, it is a death for the entire nation, not just my nation, but for every one of us. It's a chance lost to repair and rebuild bridges with the community of all of our different practices that are still being used today. And so I just wanted to make sure to bring light to that situation. It's the only one I included in this collection, but that is something that I am very big on and trying to bring more awareness to at the moment. If you want to scroll to the next one, Miss Sally. These two are pendulum paintings that I had done. I wanted to make sure to include other pieces other than my traditional Indigenous artwork, just for the simple fact that we do need more representation in our communities. And I just want to remind everyone that, you know, we are Native, we are Indigenous, we do have things, you know, rules that we stick by within each tribe and lessons to give out to everyone. And I want to make sure that everyone does remember that, yes, we are Indigenous, but we do have other inspirations as well. And so these two would represent some of my other pieces of artwork. You can go ahead to the next one, honey. This is some more of our traditional work. Of course, the first on the left is an arrowhead. The one on the right is a star, as Miss Nadema had, she had painted quite a few. And so I'm very happy that she included those, and I was able to include mine as well, my interpretation from Virginia, from the Monacan Indian Nation. The middle painting is called Colonization. It is our four sacred colors, and we are all being pulled in different directions, away from our traditional teachings, away from our families, away from our heritage and our culture. And I wanted to make sure to represent that on a large scale. That painting is a 4 foot by 4 foot painting. So it's pretty big and noticeable if you are able to go and see it when it is in the gallery. You can go to the next one, huh? These two are another example of some of the work that I do that is a little out of the normal traditional range. All of the twists and turns in the image on the left actually represent the swing and sway of the fringe for the women's regalias. One of the things that I was inspired by when I was very young, I was 7 when I participated in my first powwow, and I was just amazed by the contrast of the movement of the dancers and the fringe and the regalia moving in unison together, but separately in the same circle against the juxtaposition of the mountains where I come from. So it was really cool as a child to be able to, not only participate, but to see history in motion. And that's what both of these 2 drawings represent. The one on the right has more sharp edges. And so that one is one that I would consider in representation of the mountains where I come from, whereas the left is the dancers. So for me as a child at 7, these are the images that came to mind, even though they're in black and white. For this presentation, they are definitely not. They're very bright colors, just like the normal things that we would wear in our regalias to the powwows. The brighter, the better from the tribe that I come from. We are, I don't want to say that we're flashy, but we take pride in everything that we do. And so we try to make our regalia stand out just like I do my artwork. And so some of the things will be in very, very bright colors. You can go to the next one, huh? These 3, the left is a shield that I painted for a family member that was just used in the Monacan Indian Nation powwow this year. He is a dancer that travels across country as well as up and down the Indian Trail on the East Coast. And I wanted to make sure, especially because he spends a lot of time with Lakota Nation. So I wanted to try to give him something that would honor not only him and his heritage, but also something that could maybe give a little nudge to the Lakota Nation as well, so that when he is out west, he is fully accepted. I like to make sure that anything that I'm going to do for someone transfers over. I would never want to do something that may be offensive to another nation. The second one is actually a picture of the fan that belongs to the same family member who has this shield. So this would be the fan that he used to carry with his regalia that was gifted to me after going through quite a bit of trauma. That's actually one of the reasons why I paint, is to help heal and connect with my heritage and my culture. The picture on the right is the closest that I have gotten so far to drawing the same way that my ancestors would have. I try to use limited colors, even though, yes, they are bright and shiny, of course. Remember, I did state that, sometimes we are flashy. However, this is one of the closest that I've gotten so far to being able to portray the same way that my ancestors would have, especially being born is far away from them. I think I did a pretty good job. I'm not positive, but it is a beautiful picture regardless. Thank you. You can try the next one, sweetie. I believe this is the last one. So these are acrylic pours, not as bright. I tried to go a little more traditional with these. They, thank you to whoever said flashy is good. The one on the right actually represents a thunderstorm passing overhead. If you've ever looked at any of those geothermal maps, when a hurricane or anything like that is going over top, this is a black and white version of that. And the one on the left is to represent a geode. It's just a pretty picture. There's not too much meaning behind this one. It just happens to be beautiful. My job as an artist, I feel as though I have been called to make sure that there is more Indigenous representation in the communities, to make sure that the generations that come after us tend to follow in our footsteps. And we want to make it as easy as possible for them to be able to go down in history just like their fellow family members. We want to make every opportunity possible for them. And so I will continue to create as many paintings as possible and bring as much representation as I can to any cause that's necessary. That's pretty much all I have, Miss Sally.
Thank you. I love the range of your work. It's so inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay. And yes, we have Ethan. Let me find my introduction here. Welcome, Ethan. Ethan Brown works in multiple mediums, including gourd art, oil painting, sculpture, and filmmaking. He's a Pamunkey tribal citizen and resident of the Pamunkey Indian Reservation in King William, Virginia. He has completed visual art commissions for the Big Ideas Company in London, England, the King William Historical Museum, and for Chesapeake Bay National Parks, among others. Ethan's oil painting, Walter Bradby, 2018, is part of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts permanent collection. Ethan recently co-directed the experimental short film, I will ask you to pronounce that for me, Ethan.
Senecomica.
Thank you, 2020, and contributed photography to the Emmy-nominated short documentary, Connecting Currents, Pamunkey River, Lifeblood of Our People 2020. His gourd, Medicine Man, recently won third prize at the annual Juried Art Show at Arts on Main in Gloucester, Virginia, 2021. Thank you for being here, Ethan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I just want to talk about my journey as an artist and sort of my process and where my creativity comes from. So really started, I was 18, I was out of high school and I was here on the reservation, and just my uncle is an accomplished sculptor and my grandma was a good artist. And so I think just living here and seeing their art was the first thing that really inspired me. Sort of just the aura of what a piece of art can do in your home, just the feelings it can make you feel just being around it every day. So that was part of it. And then part of it was just as a way to initially make money. The reservation is at the end of the road in the country. And it's always been a tradition here, going back to the 1800s. The people living here were subsistence farming, and we always had a trading post at the front of the reservation, and people would make crafts and pottery and sell it there as a way just to make money living out here in the country. And so that tradition has continued to the modern day. In the 1930s, we opened a pottery school with a state grant that introduced more contemporary practices into our pottery making, so that the people here could make more money during the Great Depression when times were tough here. And nowadays we have a museum here on the reservation that people visit, and we have a gift shop, and a lot of our modern tribal members still make arts and crafts to sell there. So really I was 18 and I just trying to find what I wanted to do with my life, and I started just making some art to put in there, not really thinking about it, and just the feeling of selling the artwork just kept me to keep going. But after a while, making art to make money, you kind of get burnt out on it because you're not going to make a lot of money. So what's kept me going is really the process of making art itself. And it's really just a personal meditation. Most of my artwork is based on intuition. So I don't really try to think a lot about what I'm doing. It's just the process itself. I try to internalize techniques and themes. And so when I sit down with a piece of art, it's just a process that sort of comes out. And once I make a piece, it sort of feels distance from me. So I put it for sale or whatever. And then I move on to the next piece. And that's really what it is for me. And I just wanted to talk about how I make gourd art. So we've always had the tradition of making gourd art as one of our mediums. So some of the gourds I grow in the garden, and then you have to clean off the mold that grows on it, and you get a hard-shelled gourd. And usually I start with a line drawing with pencil, And then I take a wood burning tool and like this, and then I burn the pencil line into the gourd. And then I use various acrylic paint, oil stains, or ink dyes to finish off the image. I usually use the flora and fauna just of our area as inspiration, as well as reading through the historical record. There wasn't a lot of visual artwork that was, depicts a lot of the scenes in the historical record for our tribe. So using art to sort of show some of the stories of, past chiefs or historical events from our area, that's one of the things that has inspired me to make art. So that's all I really wanted to share.
Thank you so much. This has been incredible. It's almost one, but I open it up for anyone who has any comment. I thank you for all the comments in the chat. Any reactions? Any artists want to talk to each other or ask each other questions? Thank you all for being here. This has been really inspiring. So does anyone want to unmute or have any feedback?
Yeah, this is Connor. I just wanted to add that I really love that how much focus is being put into all of our expressions. All the speakers have really expressed this concept that they're doing things for future generations and that they're trying to communicate with wider audiences. I think, and I know Ethan can probably definitely relate to this. Like sometimes you can get sort of like huddled into your own little cone sometimes of what you're working on and your own creativity. And it feels so good once you put something out there and you realize that you're giving back. And I really love that all the speakers have mentioned that. It feels really good.
Agreed. Any other artists or audience have any feedback? I think, oh, go ahead.
I just, I always appreciate being, shown alongside so many contemporary artists. And I love like Nadema's work, who's been around and showing. It's so, I love the richness of it. And I love how I always find like people are surprised. They're like, oh, you're not what we expected. Like when I'm signing up for things, and also because I'm like the white sheep of my family and very light skinned. So it's just nice to like have that unexpected thing to like help people recognize that like we're existing. We've always been existing alongside all the pop culture movements, all the world events, like where we've taken a place and evolved. We've been alive and been evolving in that same way artistically and conceptually. So I just always appreciate the range of contemporary works. So thanks for including me.
Yes, and thank you, Beth, for sharing all the links in the chat to all these artists' work and various interviews, and they're all available on our website that Beth linked. And thank you again. It's been a wonderful presentation, and there will be a short survey that comes up. If you can fill it out, we'd appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.